Thank you for joining the 2017 Alameda County Point-in-Time Count training. We are excited to introduce the new methodology that will help to expand data on the unsheltered population of Alameda County. For those of you who are returning to the count, you will see that the methods have changed from a survey-based enumeration at service centers to a full canvassing effort of all county census tracts. The count is also being conducted in two phases, separating the count and survey efforts. We look forward to sharing additional details regarding the new methodology as this training continues. So today we'll be covering the purpose of the PIT count. And when I say PIT count, PIT stands for point in time count. So we're going to be reviewing the purpose of this PIT count, why the PIT count matters, what the PIT count will tell us. We'll be reviewing what you will be doing on the day of the count, and then we'll finish up going over next steps and reminders. I'm going to start by reviewing the purpose of the point-in-time count. The Department of Housing and Urban Development requires this point-in-time count to be completed of every homeless person in the United States during the last 10 days of January. These unsheltered counts are currently required every other year, and the counts are happening all over the country. They must be organized in this manner in the last 10 days of January to minimize double counting. The PIT count is one of many different strategies the federal department uses to understand homelessness and allocate funding for services. While there are many different data sources that help us to understand the state of homelessness in Alameda County, the PIT count remains essential to county and national efforts. It is one of very few opportunities we have for connecting with those who are unsheltered and not seeking services. It is also the primary data source used by HUD and by extension Congress to determine the scope and scale of homelessness in the United States. It helps to increase the community understanding of homelessness. It retains and improves funding for homeless services and meets federal data reporting requirements. It generates valid, accurate data regarding individuals and families experiencing homelessness in our community. And lastly, it links homeless data collection efforts to national and local strategic program and policy planning. The PIT and survey is a four-step data collection process. You'll see three boxes here, but the middle box has two components in it. We begin with the shelter count, where we collect information on the number of individuals staying in each shelter of Alameda County on the night of January 30th. Then we do the street count. That's where you come in on the morning of the 31st. And later in the day and evening, we will conduct a youth count where we count individuals experiencing homelessness who are under the age of 25. The fourth and final component of the process is the survey, where we go out into the field and conduct surveys of a representative sample of individuals experiencing homelessness based off of the number we find during the street count. These surveys give us a better understanding of what homelessness looks like in Alameda County. This is different from what has happened in previous years, as we will be separating the survey effort from the PIT count. This year's count will really focus on getting to folks where they sleep at night, rather than where they access services. This change will allow us to connect with those who do not seek services and get a better idea of where people reside, rather than where they must seek assistance. All right, so now it's time to review the definition of unsheltered homelessness. So I'm going to read through the definition in a minute, but first I just want to go over and review the fact that this might come off as somewhat of a limited definition. So I want to remind you that the PIT count is one of many different strategies that the federal department uses to understand homelessness and allocate funding for services. Though it is limited, the reason for this is because we are able to focus on a specific population with specific needs, and that will then enable us to have a better understanding of this population and provide funding for them. And just remember that this process is just one piece of the puzzle. So the definition, I'm going to go ahead and read it word for word. It's the Hearth Act definition, category 1, and it states that homelessness is defined as individuals and families who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, including individuals and families with the primary nighttime residence that is a public or private place not designated for or ordinarily used as a regular sleeping accommodation for human beings. I will go ahead and review this a little bit further in the next slide and what that means and what that includes and doesn't include. This slide is meant to review a little bit further what is included and not included in this definition. I want to mention that also included in the count are transitional housing programs dedicated to homeless persons, shelters, and warming centers that operate in cold and wet weather. These will be counted through the shelter count. These are some examples of situations included in the definition as well as those that are not included. Though the people listed who are not included are precariously housed, the HUD definition does not include them for the purposes of this count. A couple more logistics I want to review. Just a reminder that volunteers will not be paid for their time, nor will they be reimbursed for their mileage while out in the census tract areas. Homeless guides are paid $15 an hour, and that's for their expertise during the count as well as for their time spent in training. Just a reminder that all homeless guides must have a 2017 pit count referral card and a training attendance card in order to receive payment on the day of the count. Another reminder that all payments will be made when teams return to the deployment center on the day of the count. So payment for homeless guides attending trainings as well as their time spent out in the field will be received after they return with materials at the end of the count. This slide reviews what to expect on the morning of the count. Guides and volunteers will arrive at 5 or 6 a.m. depending on your location, and we hope to have you out the door in the field as soon as possible. We will do a brief training to review the data collection methods and safety protocols, and then we will make the teams. I will speak a little bit more in detail about the team creation logistics in one of the next slides. Once we have distributed all of your materials, you will head out into the field. We will collect your contact information during the checkout process and also give you the number of the deployment captain so you can contact them with any questions you might have while in the field. We expect all teams to be back by around 10 a.m. You might come back before that if you finish your map areas earlier, but please call us if you think you might need any longer time than what we're expecting you to be out. Here you see a couple pictures of some areas that would be included. This left picture would be an example of an encampment. So an encampment is an area that has at least 2 or more tents or makeshift shelters. And then on the right is an example of a bus station where you might find somebody sleeping and they would be defined as homeless. This slide reviews how we create our teams on the morning of the count. This process is new to Alameda County, so we appreciate your willingness to try something different. We will match up 1 to 2 volunteers with a guide. We will try as best as possible to send you to areas that you are familiar with, but remember that we are responsible to cover the entire county, so we need your help to get all maps assigned to teams. We are currently working with service providers and guides to identify guides familiar with different areas of the county. However, we do not always have guides familiar with areas where individuals experiencing homelessness are less likely to reside. Counting these areas is, however, essential. Having guides cover these areas is also essential. While they may not know the specific area, they will help to identify locations where you are more likely to see people sleeping outside. We need to know where folks are not currently residing as much as we need to know where they are. This helps to determine service planning and provides insight in change in the communities over time. So we just finished up reviewing some samples of the tally sheets. Again, we'll go over that on the day of the count. Next, we just have a few more slides here and then we'll be all done. I'm going to take a second to review the guide and volunteer roles for the day of the count of your team. We expect that the homeless guide, uses their knowledge to identify individuals experiencing homelessness. The guides bring the team towards locations and map assignments that are likely to have individuals experiencing homelessness. When you're handed your map, originally at the deployment center, you guys can work together to kind of go over the map. And then when you're out and about driving and walking up through all the streets, we hope that your homeless guide would be able to direct you to certain locations that are likely to maybe have somebody sleeping in them. The guide also helps distinguish between safe and potentially dangerous situations. The volunteer role is to provide consultation and support in team decisions. The volunteer is generally in charge of the transportation, and the volunteer helps ensure full coverage of the map assignment. We ask that the teams reach a consensus together on who will be in charge of the tally sheet to ensure correct methodology. So you guys can work together while you're out in the field as far as who's going to be filling in the bubbles when they see somebody on the street or in the tent or in a vehicle. That can be the guide or the volunteer, whatever system works best for you. So next, I'm going to review the data collection forms. So the two important things that you're going to be going out in the field with are the maps and the tally sheets. So I have a few slides coming up that will show you what to expect. This is the sample of a census tract map that you might receive on the day of the count. Depending on the size of the map area, it is possible that you will receive more than one map. But for the purposes of this training, we'll just be reviewing one census map. It is important that you keep track of which tally sheets go with which map. On the top right of this map, you see the number census tract number 4507.5. You'll have a corresponding tally sheet that has the same number on top. So when you see somebody within this census tract map area, you will need to make sure you put that person, you mark them on the correct tally sheet. It's very important that you cover all areas of the map. The area of the map that you will be covering is outlined in this purple shade, this purple line. So the census tract map number 4507.5 is outlined in this purple color. Again, this is a sample map, so the colors might be a little bit different on the day of the count, but there'll be a bold outlined line of the census tract map. It's very important that you stay within this boundary and do not count individuals outside of that boundary on your tally sheet. We ask that you drive or walk down every street within your map area. We want you to count on both sides of the street. Unless that street is a count border, you're only going to count on your side of the street. Look for open areas. Oftentimes you'll need to get out of your vehicle and walk around. You get to decide the route you take. It might depend on traffic or if there's a shelter in your area, we ask that you cover the area surrounding the shelter first. But otherwise, you get to determine how you cover all the space within your tract. We recommend putting an X every time, for the areas of your map that you've covered so you can keep track of where you've been and where you haven't been. Another thing to pay attention to. So in addition to being aware of the map number that's on the top right, there are also jurisdictional boundaries marked on your maps. You will need to keep track of whether you're seeing somebody in the teal color part of your map or the white color. So in addition to having tally sheets for each census tract number, there'll be a separate tally sheet for when you see somebody in the teal area and when you see somebody in the white colored area. Your team map could potentially have some areas that are blacked out. Those would be areas and locations that are covered by outreach teams, so please do not cover those areas. Again, it's not likely that everybody will have those on their maps, but I'm only mentioning it in case you see it. Like the sample on here, there's a black area on top. That's not even in your map area, but that's an area that is being specially covered by an outreach team. I hope this makes sense. We'll be reviewing the maps in person on the morning of the count, and once you have them in hand, it'll be a little bit easier to follow what I'm talking about. I talked a bit about this when we were reviewing the map earlier, but we have a special slide just to reiterate the importance of it. You must use a different tally sheet for each jurisdictional area. On that map, you saw a teal colored area and a white area, so make sure you're recording on the correct tally sheet for the correct color. This is an example of what the tally sheet looks like. So in addition to your map, you will have this tally sheet. This is how you describe the individuals that you're seeing. In the coming slides, I'm going to go over and review some examples of what you might find. But for now, I just wanted you to see what this looks like. All these boxes on the top will be pre-filled out by us. That's for our coding purposes and to explain what this tally sheet goes with. But the boxes on the bottom, that's the area that you will fill out for individuals that you see. All right, so next few slides will be some samples of how to fill in your tally sheets. So on the bottom in red, this would be, you see one individual who looks to be about in their 30s on the street. So you'll go through and mark line number 1, fill in for male if the individual is a male. If the individual is a female, you can bubble F. T stands for transgender. U stands for unknown. So you would mark unknown if the individual is sleeping in a sleeping bag or has a hat on or a hood and you can't tell whether they're male or female. It's okay to put unknown. Then you select the age category that you are assuming they're in, and then you go over to the dwelling or vehicle type and you write where you saw them. Since this individual was on the street, you fill in the bubble for street. The next sample we have would be if you see a family. So this family is 2 adults and 1 child. So I marked here that line 1 would be male in the 25 to 54 category on the street. Second would be a female in the 25 to 54 category on the street. And then the third line is for the child, so under 18, female on the street. This, you'll see a column that says family. Only fill in those bubbles if you can tell that it's a family, and then you'll fill in the bubble for each line, and then we ask that you draw a circle around them. I don't imagine that you will find many families while out on the street. However, it's important to review this so that if you do, you can appropriately mark that they are a family. Next would be a sample of a vehicle. So I reviewed earlier some signs to look for vehicles who are inhabiting homeless individuals. Now I'm going to review what to do if you see one. So likely, if you see a vehicle, you won't necessarily know how many people are in there. So it's okay to just put one line and circle in a bubble for car. If you are able to see, if you're able to see 2 people and you can guess their gender and age, you can go ahead and fill in a line for each person and put car and fill in the bubble for car on each line. But this is an example of you being unable to tell how many people are inhabiting the vehicle, but you can tell that somebody's living in there and that you are seeing a car. Then on the back of your tally sheet, we ask that for that car, so line number 1, you would put the last 4 digits of the license plate. We don't want all the digits of the license plate. This isn't a means of trying to track these cars down. This is solely for deduplication purposes. So when we go through and are processing the data, we'll make sure that the same car wasn't counted twice in case the car is moving around and going to multiple different census tract areas. As I mentioned in the previous slide, individuals living in their cars are included in this definition. So this slide is meant to review how to tell if a car or a vehicle appears to be inhabited by a homeless individual. So you're going to look for signs of habitation in the car. So that would be fogged windows, maybe electrical connections coming out of the car, screen or window coverings. Oftentimes there'll be household items inside and outside of the vehicle, making it seem like more of a permanent living place. You might hear sounds of music or talking from the inside of the vehicle. And then sometimes there are some known safe parking locations or known vehicles by your homeless guide. So remember, we don't want you, and I'll review this a little bit more in the safety slides, but we don't want you to be going up to these cars or knocking on their windows to see or ask these individuals if they are homeless. Rather, we want this to be a visual count. So hopefully you can remember this slide and work with your homeless guide to determine whether a vehicle appears to be inhabited by homeless individuals or not. This is a slide just to review the importance of all census tract areas. So 0 counts do matter. It's possible that you'll come back from your map area having not found anyone. That doesn't mean you did something wrong or that you're collecting bad data. 100% coverage of the county means that you may be assigned to some areas that don't include any unsheltered individuals. It's okay to go out and find no one. Everyone home is working to have fewer and fewer homeless people in the county. It is critical to know where people are, but it's also critical to know where people are not, so that service and outreach teams are most effective. Zero count areas may change over time, and we can only see this change if we look for it. So remember, it's okay to come back with 0. Next, I'm going to go through some safety logistics and just a couple more slides, and then we'll be done. It's important that you are very safe and do not take any risks while out in the field. Like I mentioned before, this is a visual count only, so please do not approach individuals and ask them if they are homeless. Observe and tally only. Also, we want to make sure that you are not taking any photos while in the field. We want to respect these individuals' privacy, and we don't want them to think we're going to be doing anything with these photos. Also, we want to review and make sure you know that all information and locations that we collect on the day of the count will be kept confidential. This information is not discussed with outer groups after the count. Rather, it stays within our office and we process the data. It's important to stay with your teammate while you're out. Please don't separate. We ask that you stay together and keep track of each other and work together. We want to make sure that you're respectful of those individuals that you're counting. We want to remind you to call your deployment center captain if you have any problems or questions. Some more safety things to review. Don't enter abandoned buildings or other hard to access areas unless the team is familiar with those locations. So again, work together as the guide and volunteer to make a decision on what's the most safe route for you. Don't advertise your count location and keep information confidential post-count day. Again, this was where we want to remind you, if you see any encampments or you come across any tent areas, we don't want you to be sharing that information post-count. We want to respect those people's living accommodations. We'll review these safety protocols on the day of the count, and then, as always, while you're out in the field, call 911 if you have a true emergency. A couple things to review as far as preparation. You're going to want to try to wear comfortable shoes and clothes. You'll likely be out and about walking a lot. Dress warmly. You're out there early. As a volunteer, we ask that you bring a car if possible. Best to bring a charged cell phone that you can use while out in the field. You might want to bring a flashlight. You're going to be starting off pretty early in the morning, so some areas might be dark. A reminder that we'll be going out rain or shine. So bring an umbrella or raincoats if it's raining, and then get plenty of rest the night before. We'll be out there nice and early. You will be updated via email with any new information about the count, and then we have a 2017 Homeless Pit Count hotline if you have any questions, and that is through Applied Survey Research. The number is listed below. Or you can also email Connie at appliedsurveyresearch.org if you have any questions from this training or any questions about where to go or what to do. But remember, we will review this training and the data collection protocols on the morning of the count when you arrive to your deployment center. Like I mentioned earlier, within the week or so before the count, we will email you with your deployment locations. If you are curious about that or need more information, feel free to reach out to this number or email when you're done with this.